Hello and welcome back, goats, to the BigBluePurple channel. Today I want to talk about the new extreme trial fights introduced in Dawntrail, so obviously full spoilers ahead for those two fights. And as you're seeing on screen now, I was actually fortunate enough to get the mount from EX1 in only around 20 kills, so I was very happy about that. These are some incredibly fun extreme trials, so without further ado, let's just get straight into the fights. The first of these fights is none other than Valleygarmonda. And I just want to say, this is such an excellent entry point as a first extreme trial. I feel like they struck a super great balance, man, of making a fun fight for people who've been playing for a while, but also making a very approachable and digestible fight for people who have never done extreme before and, this is their entry point, this expansion. The kind of core mechanic and idea behind this fight is that the boss is going to cycle through 3 different elements, being fire, ice, and lightning, very much like a Latreon from Monster Hunter if you're familiar with that. And depending on which one of these phases he's in, he's going to have different mechanics. For example, the first one he does is his fire phase, and during this phase, 2 volcanoes are going to spawn on the left and right sides of the map, and you got to pay attention to which one's erupting, and then you don't want to be on that side. Also during this phase, after he does like a donut or an out or a sides mechanic, which he does a lot, there's going to be a partner stack that follows that. That's kind of the main idea behind the fire phase, is that you got a partner stack after his mechanics. And right off the bat, man, partner stacks and like light party stacks and that type of stuff being present in this fight is super important in my opinion. This was something that was lacking from Zodiark as a first extreme trial and Endwalker. And as someone who did Zodiark as his first ever extreme, I can safely tell you I learned absolutely fucking nothing from that fight, because you don't have to learn anything. You just follow the guy with the triangle on his head. Whether or not that makes Zodiark a good or a bad fight isn't really the point I'm trying to make. I'm just saying, as a new player, it doesn't really teach you anything that you need to know for other fights, whereas Valleygarmonda here teaches you a lot of things you're going to need to know, and it doesn't overwhelm you while doing so. One of my favorite mechanics present in this fight is this tank buster, man. The tanks have to alternate because they get a debuff every time they stand in that. And on top of this, the whole party has to stand behind the tank because the tank basically has to eat this cleave and make a small pizza slice for the party to stand in. This is such a badass tank buster, and I think what's so good about this too, man, is that as someone who's not playing as a tank, you're still getting to do something. You still have to pay attention. The tank buster is still a mechanic to the party as well, and I think that's a really unique take on tank busters, since, usually in extreme trials, they very much only single out the tank. The rest of the party doesn't really worry about it. Healers heal them up. It's just a really fucking cool tank buster, and I hope they do more stuff like this throughout the expansion. As you're seeing there was some like light party puddle drop mechanics going on. Again, great for new players. Teach them how light parties work. Teach them about thinking about group 1, group 2, all the type of stuff that is present in pretty much every Savage and Extreme fight. Before he switches to his next element, there's this actually pretty damn good ads phase where the party has to split into 2 and take down these nails while eating these huge wild charge stacks. The tank has to stand in front and eat the brunt of the hit. And overall, this ads phase is actually pretty damn fun. If you've been around on this channel and you've seen other videos I've made on extreme trials, I typically dog on the ad phases for being boring as shit. I mean, looking at Ruby Conte in particular, really wasn't a fan of that ads phase, but I think this one's pretty well done and I actually enjoy doing it. It's also just a really well-paced ads phase. It doesn't overstay its welcome, and as long as you're killing the ads fast enough, it's not going to interfere with your 2-minute burst either. So overall, it just feels like a well-placed ad phase, and it's fun to repeat even when you're farming the fight. Also, this massive raid wide he does after the ads phase looks so damn cool. I love how he uses like the ice, the lightning, and the fire all together to just do this massive fucking raid wide. He also just looks angry as shit when he lands on the platform with both of his heads and red eyes and shit. This boss looks really cool. I'm a big fan of his design. One of my favorite things that this fight chooses to do that I think is really cool is the second time he casts Skyrune here, he can either go into his ice phase as you're seeing now, or his lightning phase, which are the 2 remaining phases of the fight basically. So what this means is you can effectively prog both ice and lightning phase without seeing both of them in the same pull. So overall, this fight is very friendly to prog because you can see all the mechanics without seeing the whole fight. I also really like how the ice and fire markers you're seeing here change depending on the phase. The fires are still light party stacks, but the ices, rather than just being motion, are now a huge tank buster defamation that they have to take away from the party. The fight does this really good job at reusing certain mechanics that are visually similar, but changing what they do to kind of catch you off guard as the phases progress. The core idea of his ice phase is that those avalanches from normal mode make a return, but at the same time he's going to be doing all sorts of other mechanics you have to dodge at the same time. Here, after each mechanic, he lays those kind of align AoE shooters on the ground, I don't really know what to call them, and you need to dodge them in a very specific way. The dodge is the same every time, so you'll get very comfortable doing it. A nice little detail there that you saw in this phase too is if you get hit by the ice mechanics, it's going to freeze your ass and then your teammates got to break you out. So I like that kind of extra layer to, like, if you get hit by a mechanic, your team's got to be there for you. This spikesicle mechanic he's doing with these different ice lines, it looks really confusing at first, but it's one of those mechanics where once you get the feeling of how to dodge it, the dodge stays the same every single time and you'll just get very comfortable doing this, especially if you're farming. The main catch here is that in his ice phase, while he's doing this mechanic, there's tons of other shit going off, there's an avalanche going off, you just have to make sure you're paying attention and not getting hit by anything. And then moving on to his lightning phase, which is one of my favorites within the fight because it has these cool, like, elevating platforms you have to use. He starts the phase with like a super regular light party stack. There's nothing special about this one, and there's no mechanic that follows after it, so it's just kind of a breather here. But a little bit after that, he'll start his Hail of Feathers mechanic, which is like our Mario Kart mechanic for this fight. You just gotta go opposite of where all these AoEs are going off and do a nice little Mario Kart around. And the main idea here is you need to target the first feather that you come across, so it's going to be this one here, and we need to destroy that feather to make a safe spot as quickly as possible. Do not greed here on the last feather that drops. It hurts bad. I've died to it a couple of times by greeding. Overall, a nice little simple group party mechanic. You just run around and kill and add, but it feels good to do and it's a lot of fun. Now he'll do the lightning and ice markers from previous phases again. The ice markers this time need to stand on an elevated platform, and then it's going to drop the ice basically underneath them so they don't get frozen, and the lightning people just need to spread out and make sure they're not hitting each other. Again, really cool way of reusing that ice marker but changing it in each and every phase. And then in this phase, when he does either the donut or the out or the sides mechanic, it's going to drop AoEs underneath where you were, so you just have to move as soon as you actually do the dodge. Here he does this really cool, like, he makes one row of the arena safe with those lightning things, and then he'll do his Thunderous Breath from normal mode, which hits anyone who's not elevated, so you have to find a safe spot within the elevated squares. But that's it. That's pretty much the entirety of Valley Garmonda. It's a very approachable fight if you've never done an extreme before. I'm a really, really big fan of a lot of the ideas present here. The fight feels fresh and new, but it also uses a lot of mechanics that are core to raiding and things that you need to learn early as a raider. So, you know, again, if you've never done any kind of raiding before, but you're interested, start here. It's a great, great starting point, and it's going to teach you a lot of things. Next up is Everkeep Extreme featuring Zeralja, and this one is without a doubt the harder of the two in my opinion, but it's not like leaps and bounds above the first one. It just has some mechanics that are harder to wrap your head around when you're initially learning them. At the beginning of the fight, he does these kind of cross AoEs similar to Emerald Weapon and pairs it with either forward half or backward half, which means he's either going to jump forward or jump backwards and then do a cleave. And so, you know, it's kind of confusing on your brain at first, trying to figure out, like, where's he going to jump if he does forward half, where's he going to jump if he does backward half. But it's honestly not that bad, and after you've repeated the fight a few times, you'll get used to it. The real meat of this fight is when he casts Dawn of an Age here and destroys a bunch of the arena, makes it quite a bit smaller. And he also makes the arena look sick as fuck, dude. Like, look at that background, man. It looks so cool. But just like the normal modes, he's going to spawn multiple platforms around the main platform, and then he's going to go ahead and spawn swords on each of those platforms. He'll then tether to 2 sets of the swords, and then basically the swords will effectively slide over to the main platform that he's tethered to and hit those squares and make them unsafe. So my main method of dodging this is I look at one of the squares where the swords aren't tethered to, and I just stand in one of the swords. And as you can see there, I fucked it up anyway because I'm stupid, but you know, you live and you learn. EX2 is kind of one of those fights for me where I get hit by a lot of things in this fight, but it doesn't really matter because you just take a vuln up and you live. This mechanic he does here confused the ever-living shit out of my brain when I was first trying to figure this out, but overall it's not too bad once you've done it a few times, especially because he gives you a lot of time to read the mechanic. If a sword is going through one of the wind circles, it's going to do a huge knockback. You're going to want to pop arm's length or dodge the mechanic correctly like you saw there. and then the other swords are just going to do cleaves in like a kind of cross shape, so you need to not stand in line with them. But because they're kind of going through those weird warp portals and changing their position, it can fuck with your head when you're learning it. I would say this is kind of one of those Zodiac Extreme type mechanics where as long as one guy in your party knows where to stand, you can all kind of go with them, and then you just have to spread afterwards. When it comes to these kind of hard to understand but easy to resolve type mechanics, I like them sometimes and other times I don't, but I feel like in the case of Zoraija particularly, it's done really, really well. Like comparing it to the pizza slices in Ruby Kante, if you've done that fight, I think that's an example of it being boring as shit to have like a kind of hard to read mechanic, but you can just follow one guy. I feel like Zoraija does it a little bit better and keeps it pretty entertaining across pulls. This projection of triumph mechanic is super cool though. It reminds me of Super Chain Theory from P12S Phase 1. But obviously a much more approachable version of it. This is an extreme trial. But basically, one side's going to have a bunch of spreads going through, and one side's going to have a bunch of donuts going through. But at the same time, you've got to dodge what the boss is doing, because he's going to do either backward half or forward half, as you saw there. And I ate shit because I'm bad. I believe this was one of my first ever clears of the fight, so hey, give me a break. I've gotten better at it by now. Now, this next mechanic he does is one of the most unique and interesting extreme trial mechanics we've seen in a while, in my opinion. Basically, this stack line is going to come through, and all the players get this ring around them. We have to stack in like a conga line formation, because after someone takes their stack, they get a vuln up for a couple of seconds, as you're seeing on the screen now. But then you just have to basically keep stacking together in this conga line and taking the stacks together. And the tanks solo it up front because they can handle the damage. But, you know, melee DPS, healers, whatever, we need people to stack with us to survive. And so this is kind of the strategy people employ. At the beginning of the fight, you're going to pick a position on this conga line, and then that's where you're going to eat your stack. This mechanic just feels super fresh to me. Like, yeah, it's stack markers, which we've seen a million times before. It's just the way it's presented and handled and resolved. It's super unique, especially for an extreme fight, and I was really, really impressed with that mechanic. And the fight only gets better from here when we reach one of my favorite parts of the entire fight. We've got enumerations going off here, but these enumerations are going to knock back the person like who doesn't have the enumeration. It's going to send them over to the opposite platform. So your partner's got to help aim you and angle you over to the platform without sending you to your doom. Now, during this part of the fight, he's going to spawn swords on both sides of the platform, and then you got to just kind of stand in line with where the swords are not going to hit, similar to what we saw earlier in the fight, but a different kind of variation of it. And then at the same time, everyone's going to get one of these spreads, so you got to be in a different square than each other. You know, it's like E4S if you've ever done that. After that, though, he'll spawn these tornadoes on the platform, which are really, really interesting, because he'll do either forward half or backward half, and then one side of the party is going to have to jump over to the other side in order to dodge this mechanic. I love these kind of knockback, jumping around platforms type mechanics in 14. I really like Diamond Weapon as well. That did stuff like that. I think it's a really fun idea, and I'm glad this fight utilizes it in a way that feels fun. He'll then tether everyone together with these kind of chains, and then, you know, you're going to have to work together with your partner to break them, so whoever didn't jump across the first time for the first dodge is going to jump across the second time. I really enjoyed this part of the fight. My only wish is that he did a few more things during it, but overall, it's a really, really fun part of the fight to me. Otherwise, he'll repeat his projection of triumph from earlier with the donuts and the spreads coming in, but this time he'll change up what he's doing during it. So if you remember in the normal mode, he had like a half circuit and a half full mechanic, and if it's a half circuit, you need to be inside of his hitbox when it goes off, and if it's half full, you need to be outside of his hitbox when it goes off. So it's just a little extra layer of dodge during this projection of triumph, but honestly, I find this one to be a bit easier to dodge than the first one, just because that forward half, backward half mechanic fucks with my head sometimes. After this, though, it's pretty much just repeat mechanics, so as long as you're comfortable with what you've done so far, you're going to be able to get the clear from here. Overall, if I were to give a kind of verdict on which of the two fights I prefer, I would say that Valigar Manda is the one I prefer a little bit. I just think the fight has a really nice pace to it. It feels like you're always moving around and doing something, and at the same time, it's really chill. I feel like I could just hop into Valigar Manda and just hang out for a while, kill the boss a few times. It's just a super chill fight to farm, you know? But that being said, I still absolutely enjoy farming Zoraija. I think I've killed Zoraija around 15 times, and I've killed Valigar Manda just over 20 times or something like that. So, you know, not a ton of kills by any means, but certainly enough to talk about the fights. I do really appreciate as well, though, that both fights kind of serve different roles in teaching different things to players. So again, if you're a brand new player and these are your first Extreme Trials, Valley Garmanda is going to teach you a lot of the universal core stuff that's present in a lot of fights, and Zoraal is going to teach you about learning these kind of weird fight-specific, hard to wrap your head around mechanics. And I think both of those skills are highly necessary when it comes to, you know, doing Savage fights and eventually doing Ultimate fights as well, if that's something you're interested in. So yeah, overall, I am a massive fan of the Extreme Trials this time around. I thought the ones on Endwalker launch were good too, and those were my first ever Extreme Trials, so I obviously herald some nostalgia for them. But I do think that these two are the stronger first expansion Extreme Trials, because they're so much better at teaching new players things they need to know. I've also just found myself joining farm parties for these fights way more than I did with the Endwalker EX fights, and I think that's just a testament to how fun these are to farm. They don't feel repetitive, I enjoy doing them over and over again, and I feel like there's always something new to optimize with my job, optimize with my rotation, and optimize within the fight, so it just remains fun every single pull. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the new Extreme Trials introduced in Dawntrail. I'd love to know what you guys think. Which of the two fights did you prefer? Do you think these are some of the best Extreme Trials they've done for an expansion launch? And if not, which one was your favorite, like, on-launch expansion Extreme Trial? I'm kind of like an Endwalker baby. I started in 5.55, so, you know, I didn't get to experience a lot of those fights on content. So I'd love to hear from, you know, maybe some more veteran players. What did you guys like the most as the first Extreme Trials of an expansion? Anyways, remember to drop a like on the video, but only if you did, and subscribe to the BigBluePurple channel if you're not already. I make near weekly Final Fantasy XIV content. Next up, I'm planning to make kind of a beginner's guide to getting into raiding now that Savage is on the horizon. So if any of you are interested in that, you know, subscribe and stay tuned. Anyways, thank you all for watching this video, and I will catch you in the next one.